I'd like to welcome the Minister. Minister, I wish to speak today on horticulture peat harvesting. This sector makes a major contribution to the Irish economy. There are 6,600 people directly employed by this industry and a further 11,000 in indirect employment. Many of these jobs, Minister, are in the Midlands, which have been particularly hard hit by industry closures and growing unemployment. In 2018, the Irish horticulture industry had a farm gate value of 437 million. It had exports of 239 million. Its employment value was just shy of 500 million at 497 million. Sectors directly supported by this include mushroom growing, vegetables, protected fruits, nursery stock and tree saplings. Its cost base would be greatly impacted by the proposed changes and it would put all these businesses under significant pressure. Minister, the work this industry does has very little environmental impact in the grand scheme of things. Only 0.4% of total Irish peatlands are used for horticulture peat harvesting. The CO2 emissions from horticulture peat harvesting is a mere 0.52% of protected Irish emissions in 2020. Current legislation prohibits all peatland owners, including Bord na Móna, from carrying out any work whatsoever on bogs until planning permission is granted and a valid EP licence is received. As a result of this, Growing Media Ireland and Bord na Móna ceased all peat harvesting on the 16th of June 2020. GMI and the industry are now in complete legal limbo as to whether they can harvest peat moss for the industry, and failure to do so will result in this industry collapsing in the very near future, resulting in major job losses and economic output. If this issue is not addressed, Minister, by the relevant departments, this industry faced the reality that it will run out of peat moss supply in Ireland by July 2021. If the industry is not permitted to harvest peat for horticulture, then it will be imported from other parts of the EU. Minister, this makes absolutely no sense, either economically or environmentally. And as we speak here this evening, there is peat already being imported into this country. And, you know, it's laughable in the extreme to say that we would import peat into Ireland. How does it make sense to say we cannot harvest peat moss for this sector for environmental reasons, but we can afford to ship it from other countries, when this only results in even more emissions and environmental impact? Minister, I'm calling for a common sense approach here. Sit down with the industry, sort out these issues and save jobs. And I just want to read one paragraph from the Just Transition Commissioners in his report, stating that, and I quote, "Some fast-track one-stop shop arrangement needs to be considered for planning, licensing and regulatory compliance. Greater cohesion and coordination needs to be developed." He recommended, and I quote again, that this issue be addressed as a matter of urgency. This will ensure a just transition that doesn't result in the destruction of local communities and will also ensure that measures are put in place to secure appropriate aftercare, including the rehabilitation of very valuable post-harvesting peatland habitats. And again, Minister, I want to stress that the habitats that will exist after harvesting can also be greatly beneficial to the environment. And as I said, we're talking about a very small proportion of Irish bogs, but a hugely important industry to the country. And I just also stress that if we don't allow harvesting in this country, we are going to completely undermine the cost base of the mushroom and the vegetable growing industry. And they have enough problems with Brexit and trying to keep access to the UK market. But if we really destroy their cost base in this fashion, these industries will find it virtually impossible to survive.
Minister.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle, and thank you, Deputy Cahill, and thank you both for your nice welcome. Peat, yes, is traditionally a very important component of the national horticulture and amenity plant sector. Within commercial horticulture sector, approximately 60% of the value of Irish horticulture is dependent on peat as a growth medium, with the mushroom, amenity and soft fruit sectors most reliant on peat. Indeed, as Deputy Cahill referred to, the horticulture sector is a large agri-food sector. It is in fact the fourth largest agri-food sector in this country, behind dairy, beef and pig meat. While the the industry continues to progress and develop, and of the peat that is extracted for horticultural purposes, only about 10% is used here at home in Ireland and 90% is exported. My department, however, is not involved in the regulation of peat extraction, as this is a planning process under the remit of the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. In this context, as an action under the National Peatland Strategy, the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage published a consultation document titled A Review of the Use of Peat in the Horticultural Industry, and this consultation invited written submissions from stakeholders across the sector. And on the 7th of September 2020, my colleague, Minister Malcolm Noonan, Minister of Heritage and Electoral Reform, published a report on the review of the use of peat moss in the horticulture industry. The report was prepared by an interagency working group following on from the submissions from stakeholders. After publication of this report, Minister Noonan will now set up an independent working group to consider the impacts on the sector. It is proposed that this working group will represent government departments, including my own, and there will be representation from state agencies, from environmental NGOs and indeed industry stakeholders. This working group will address the key issues raised in the report itself, including future use of peat by the horticulture sector. The position of chair for this independent working group has been advertised, and the closing date for receipt of the applications is the 23rd of November. Once the chair is in place, the selection of working group members is expected to take place.
Just to conclude, I welcome the Minister's reply, and I think there's a recognition of the huge importance of the horticulture industry and the need for peat as a source of raw material. So I welcome the formation of the working group, and as I said, I hope a common sense solution can be found. And it will absolutely make no sense to be importing peat into this country from either an economic or environmental perspective.
Thank you. I do agree with the last comments there from Deputy Cahill that it doesn't make no sense to import peat here, certainly isn't. However, I mean, the bottom line is that the sector is going to have to transition away from peat. We will not have an endless supply of peat even if we wanted to continue with extraction. And maybe in the interim, as part of that, there may well be scope to facilitate this by focusing on the domestic demand for horticultural peat rather than exporting. So that 10% that stays here as opposed to the 90% we export, there is potentially scope there. This to me would seem like a reasonable approach, putting our own growers ahead of those abroad. But indeed, my own department, in conjunction with the industry itself, are looking at alternatives, actively looking at alternatives to peat. And while there are not yet any suitable or viable alternatives yet for mushroom casing, my department is currently funding 2 research projects that have been commissioned by Ireland's mushroom producer organisation CMP. So the 2 elements to this are, there's one on spent mushroom stabilization project, and the objective here of this project is to develop a rapid aerobic process to stabilise spent mushroom compost and create a byproduct that could possibly be used as a growing substrate within the sector. That's still an ongoing piece of work. And the second alternative that's been looked into is peat casing reduction project, and the objective of this project was to look at the impacts of reducing the quantity of peat used as a casing material in mushroom production. There are a number of alternative substrates that can be used, but again, they do have issues in terms of sustainability and where the location of those. It is an issue, but I mean, it's something I think the sector can embrace with proper support from my department and others, and I do look forward to a very healthy and vibrant horticulture sector moving forward. Thank you.